Well, everyone, it's time for us to go ahead and take a look at the iPad mini 6 and compare it against the latest generation iPad 10th generation and see which specific one is the better one for you. Now, there are tons of overlap and there's a lot of similarity between these two for sure, but if you want to pick either one of these, links will be down in the description. You can get them from there and you can help support the channel at the same time. Now, starting off with the outside of both these, with the price tags, we are getting a little bit of a different price tag situation between both. So with the iPad 10 that just came out, that has a starting price of $449. With the iPad mini 6, that is starting off at $499. So there is a $50 difference between these two. And, I will say the iPad mini 6 has some tricks up its sleeves, but the iPad 10 is also a pretty good iPad too. I'm not gonna lie. It's just Apple did such weird things with that iPad that just kind of upsets me, and it upset a lot of people as well. Now on the front, the iPad mini 6 that came out last year has an 8.3-inch liquid retina display. Now it's a pretty good panel. It has True Tone on it, and it stems from the iPad mini lineup. Its main selling point is that it's a smaller iPad. So that is something to keep in mind. If you want a smaller iPad, then the iPad mini is a tremendous iPad in that standpoint. I think it's a really, really good iPad for sure. It's definitely not perfect, but I will say it definitely gets the job done without a doubt. Now with the iPad 10, we are getting a 10.9-inch liquid retina display. Now this is obviously a much bigger panel than the iPad mini 6. You're also getting True Tone on that panel, which looks and feels so amazing. And honestly, I will say the iPad 10 has a really good display. I don't know if one is way better than the other one. I think they're very similar in terms of the way you look at them. There's no ProMotion or anything. The iPad Pro still have better displays than both of these things, but I'll still say, very decent displays for sure. Now a big thing, the iPad camera now on the front of the iPad 10 is now in landscape mode, where the iPad mini 6 is basically in that portrait mode. So I like that. I actually do think that's really, really cool. Most people end up using their iPads in, landscape mode anyway. So that's a really nice feature. Now we have USB-C ports on the bottom of both these things, which is great. We have flat sides on both as well, which is really nice. So you're going to be getting that more modern feeling flat side device, which I actually prefer a ton. And on the back, we have the flat backs on both, the Apple logos in the center, the camera on the top left, and the little certification things at the bottom, which they always kind of put on all of them. And I think both of these, like I mentioned before, have way more similarities than they have differences. There are so many overlapping things between both. The USB-C ports, the design, the bezel, the cameras, everything is so similar, but you're really kind of looking at you're pretty much looking at the, size of them. Do you like the big size? Do you like the small one? That's kind of the main selling point between these two. But there's also another selling point that this is the biggest problem I have with the iPad 10. It still uses the Apple Pencil 1. So if you remember, the Apple Pencil 1 has a lightning tip at the end that you pretty much plug into the bottom of your iPad and you pretty much charge it. Now what's the problem with that? Well, basically you have to go and buy another adapter for your iPad 10 to actually utilize it. It's a $9 adapter, and it is so annoying to have to go through that and just have to buy another adapter and buy another dongle. It's just like the 2016 MacBook over again. The iPad mini 6, luckily for us, uses that, Apple Pencil 2. So you can just slap it onto the side and that's it. And I don't even know what the prices of these Apple Pencils are anymore, but with that dongle, I'm sure it's, getting closer to that Apple Pencil 2 price. So they should have just supported the Apple Pencil 2 in the first place. It makes no sense. But regardless, you do have that capability on the iPad mini 6, and that might be a deal breaker for some people. In that case, I would either go for the mini 6 or get an iPad Air at that point. So in terms of the outside, that kind of covers it up there. Now in terms of the camera setups, there's also a little bit of an overlap here. So they both have 12 megapixel wide-angle cameras on the back, and they both have 12 megapixel ultra-wide cameras on the front, which is nice. But like I mentioned, the iPad, 10 has that landscape ultra-wide camera, which I actually do think is really cool. Now, funny enough, the iPad mini 6 actually has a flash on that camera. So I'm not too sure why the iPad Air doesn't have a flash, and the standard iPads like the iPad 10 and iPad 9, they don't have flash on their camera either. So it's very interesting that this one got it. Now, I will say these cameras are so identical, you're not going to be noticing a difference. The best way to describe these cameras is that it's almost like an iPhone XR camera that's a little bit more optimized. So it's not going to be like the best of the best camera. It's not going to, blow your socks off or anything. But I will tell you that if you have something like an iPhone 11 or newer, you are probably going to have a better camera experience on your iPhone than on this iPad. As well as if you have some Samsung phones or any other phones like that are within the last 3 years or even 4 years, you're probably going to be getting a better experience on those than on this iPad. So you're still getting really cool features within iPad OS. You're getting, I would say pretty decent optimizations, but you are getting definitely a way better camera on your iPhone if it came out in the last 3 or 4 years than on these specific iPads. So definitely keep that in mind. But regardless, these things still work, and if you need to take pictures during class for your notes or whatever, well, you have that capability here, which is really cool. So in terms of that kind of covers it up there. Now in terms of software and longevity, this is another very interesting thing between both of these iPads. So with the iPad mini, you do have that A15 Bionic chip inside of it. With the iPad 10, you have that A14 Bionic chip. So again, the best way to describe it, A14 is the same one that's in the iPhone 12. The A15 is the same one that's inside the iPhone 13 and 14. So you are going to be getting probably a longer lasting iPad on something like the iPad mini 6 than the iPad, 10. Now, Apple is very, very different on the way they support their iPads. So sometimes they'll just keep supporting some really old iPad, like the iPad mini 4 and the iPad Air 2, or in this case, the iPad 5th generation. They'll just keep supporting these iPads for some reason. I don't know why they do it. And that's probably another thing to keep in mind. If you want an iPad that's going to last the longest amount of time, then of course going for the iPad mini 6 with the latest chipset is probably going to be the better idea. But I think the iPad 10, that thing is still going to be supported for many, many more years. And you are probably not going to be missing out on anything if you get that iPad, right now either. So that covers it up there. Now let's go move on to the performance segment, which I'm sure most of you are excited about. Trust me, it's not that exciting. They are both very good performing iPads. There's really not going to be that big of a difference whether you go from an iPad 10 to an iPad mini 6. So between both, the specifications between them, the A14 chip that's inside the iPad 10 is a 6-core CPU with 4-core GPUs. Get this, the A15 Bionic, 6-core CPU, 5-core GPU. So you're really only getting 1-core GPU. Now, I'm sure that's going to be still a more optimized chip. It's going to have way more things going for it. But I will say when you get something like the iPad 10, that might be giving you a better experience overall. But I will tell you, if you get the iPad mini 6, that might be giving you the better experience overall. That's probably the best thing going for the iPad mini 6 beyond than just like everything else. I would say the panel, the size, the Apple Pencil 2 support. There's a lot going for the iPad mini 6, but that chipset inside is also very nice, and it's good to have like the latest chipset inside of it. So that might make a little bit more sense if you actually go in that direction. So in my opinion, the iPad mini 6 is definitely fast, but the iPad 10 is still a very, very fast iPad as well. That thing has a ton of power built within it, and whether you're I've said this before in other videos, it's the best example. I edit a ton of videos. I go on Reddit. I do a bunch of YouTube videos and, look at YouTube videos as well. And I will never really run out of power on an iPad 10. I don't think I would ever be able to maximize it. Obviously, it would slow down and everything like that. But from all the video games I play, from everything I would do, cloud gaming as well, I would not be able to run out of any of the, problem. I would even probably be fine with an iPad, 8th generation, to be honest, as well. So that's probably the best way to describe it. I think a lot of us kind of overthink about how much power we're going to need. But I will say in the next few years, the, A14 chip is still going to be very relevant, as much as I would say the A9 chip is nowadays. So in terms of that kind of covers it up there. And to be honest, I think the iPad 10 and the iPad mini 6 are very, very interesting iPads. The iPad mini 6 is smaller, so that might be a make it or break it for you. But I will tell you, if you're okay with the size, then the iPad mini 6 is by far, in my opinion, the better iPad here just as a whole. But the iPad 10, for it having a cheaper, actually being cheaper, but also with it having the bigger design, I'm a big fan of that kind of stuff. And I don't think that's that big of a deal either, but the iPad mini 6 I think has the better features, a newer chipset, and Apple Pencil 2 support. It kind of makes a little bit more sense, but the size of the iPad 10 is what I prefer, and that might be why you might pick up the iPad 10. So that kind of covers it up there. If you have any other thoughts or questions, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.